Good morning, welcome everyone. Welcome to the 10th Advanced Manufacturing Challenge webinar, Rural Housing Solutions. My name is Sarah Buchanan. I'm the Impact Manager at Built Environment Smarter Transformation, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers planned this morning, and we'll also have a Q&A session. We should finish for about 11:30. So before we begin, I'll do a little webinar housekeeping. We are going to record the session today and it will be available on our YouTube channel from next week. If you'd like to ask a question or leave a comment, you just do it in the right hand side of your screen. We really encourage everyone to get involved. It'd be great to get all your questions and feedback. We're going to do a couple of polls today, just keep you engaged, and it really helps us inform content resources for the digital portal. You get about 30 seconds to answer and then we'll kind of chat through the results. And your feedback is extremely valuable to us, so we'll send out a little form at the end. If you could fill that in, we'd really appreciate it. It lets us know how we're doing and how we can improve the webinars that we do as part of the programme. So before I introduce our speakers, I'd just like to give you a bit of background about the AMCF project. It's an 8.9 million fund that's been delivered through Scottish Government, ERDF and Scottish Enterprise. There's 12 projects within the programme and we each work in a different economic sector of Scotland, and our primary focus is to advance digital capabilities for SMEs in Scotland. Some of the projects work in different geographical areas, and the Built Environment Smarter Transformation Make It Smart Hub is focused in the Highlands and Islands region. So we have project support, resources, case studies. Myself and Tom Warren, who's the other lead on the project, can provide time and equipment demonstrations to your business. We're looking to help you develop new products, processes, services. You'll hear today from one of the speakers about a project that we've already supported. We've got some fantastic equipment, which is housed both here in Blantyre and also at Inverness College. And we are more than willing to come and demonstrate for any of development communities, local contractors who want to increase their skill base and train up their staff. We have augmented reality, virtual reality, a laser scanner with a thermal imaging camera. We've got a 3D printer. We're going to have some huge advanced manufacturing equipment, a 5-axis and a sawmill demonstrator sitting at Inverness College. And we encourage all of you to come and use it. It's a free resource if you're looking to make investment decisions or you just simply want to know more about the technology that's happening in the industry at the moment. Anyone who works in the built environment can access this equipment. So we'd be delighted to come to you if you can't make it to Inverness in August. So at the end of the session, we'll send a little link to our online digital portal. This is a free resource for people to use. It's got case studies, information about modern methods of construction, retrofit, sustainability, anything that you want to know about your journey to accelerate to net zero. Sometimes it can be a daunting place to start, but that is what Built Environment Smarter Transformation do, is we help companies to accelerate the transition to net zero. And we'd be delighted to help anyone. We also have funding to put into projects, so please do get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. So before I introduce our main speakers, we're going to hear from Jane Millar, Isle of Gigha Heritage Trust, Alex Durie of 722 Systems, Derek Logie from Rural Housing Scotland, and I'm delighted to say we have an additional speaker, Roddy McInnes from Modular West. I'll do a little introduction before each speaker. Before we do that, we've got our first poll. So if I can just ask you to answer the questions, let us know what you think. What's the biggest barrier to starting a housing development process? A lot of the people here will know. If you don't know, that's okay. Just let us know what you think. It really helps us structure our content for webinars and resources. And of course, there's lots of barriers to development. So yeah, what do you think is one of the biggest? And the results will come up in a second. Lots of people answering, which is great. Right, okay, so we've got a bit of a mix. Lack of affordable land has come out pretty high. So perhaps we need to look at policy and how we can affect change within that. lack of suitable development consultants came in low 8%. So yeah, let's look at those and see where we can bring some improvements. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, which is Jane Millar from the Isle of Gigha Heritage Trust. Jane's been working for the Trust for 3 years now, and the main purpose of her role is to lead on the delivery of the development projects and associated activities. The community were able to purchase the island in 2002, and the Trust owns the assets, which includes 32 residential houses and 4 working farms. So we're delighted to hear from Jane today about the Trust and their work. Over to you, Jane. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm calling from the Isle of Gigha today, where rural broadband isn't quite advanced here yet, so apologies in advance for any technical glitches. Yeah, I just wanted to start off by giving a bit of an introduction to Gigha. Some of you may already be aware that the Isle of Gigha was purchased in 2002 by the community, and the Isle of Gigha Heritage Trust is the community organisation that manages the assets and land on Gigha on behalf of the community. So today I'm going to touch on some of the issues faced by rural communities like Gigha when managing and delivering housing projects. I thought it would be useful to give some context as to the housing situation on Gigha currently. Gigha has reversed its declining population from 92 residents at the time of the buyout in 2002 to 165 residents today. The Trust took ownership of 32 residential houses and 4 working farms at the time of the buyout. 25 of these residential properties underwent renovations to bring them up to a tolerable standard. Following this, Fine Homes, which is a social housing provider, developed 18 houses on the island. These 18 houses have been vital in establishing more affordable housing on the island. However, we also needed to ensure there was opportunities for private ownership. Therefore, the Trust has sold 14 plots for residential self-builds. The plots are sold with a rural burden and for the purpose of permanent residence. The Trust has recently reviewed its plot policy to promote further self-builds on the island, as well as reviewing opportunities to support younger residents who are first-time buyers and may struggle to get onto the property ladder. I think it's important to recognise there is a mixture of housing available in Gigha between community-led, social housing and privately owned properties. The Trust took ownership of a housing stock to manage, however we are now in a situation where we want to deliver more housing. The Trust is looking to deliver 5 new homes in the next few years, which are being designed to cater for specific needs in the community. The development is focusing on our young and elderly residents to ensure that they have the opportunity to remain on the island. One of the first requirements is to identify the community's housing needs. Demands for housing can be evident and prominent for the request for demand for housing and needs to be evident and prominent for requests for more housing to be supported. We achieve this through a community survey, and we also have a current waiting list for our existing Trust properties. The obvious need in many rural communities is to provide affordable housing. However, we need to make the project have a greater impact, we need to review the varying needs of those already in the community and those that aspire to live in Gigha. As mentioned, local feedback has noted that there are currently no appropriate homes for our elderly residents, and young people struggle to secure appropriate accommodation that is affordable. Whilst this project is being designed with our existing residents in mind, we also need to look at the wider context and recognise what communities need in order to sustain their economic and social activities. We recognise that designing a housing scheme that is intergenerational living has supported both current elderly residents whilst enabling younger residents to remain or even return to Gigha. The economic activity is here, however, the appropriate housing currently is not. Gigha is fortunate to be close enough to the mainland so people can commute for work when housing is not available on Gigha. However, this is not a sustainable long-term option. We recognise all communities have different needs in terms of tenant types. However, affordability is key to making rural areas more accessible to more people. As I mentioned, all communities will have varying needs. However, I suspect many rural and island communities face similar challenges when delivering housing projects. Procurement is something we have struggled with across many of our projects. Depending on the source of funding, the procurement guidance can limit the pool of potential contractors willing to tender. For example, using platforms such as Public Contract Scotland to advertise and manage the procurement process is often not favourable for local contractors in rural areas. We also have a smaller number of local contractors available to undertake these larger projects. This is both due to the location and the availability. Some contractors would not be prepared to tender for work on an island, and others have no availability. The logistics involved in transporting materials and labourers to the island in itself is an additional consideration for contractors. There are often hidden costs in transport and expenses, particularly when the ferry service may have to cancel due to weather or operational issues. Sourcing materials that fit within the project budget is often time-consuming in itself, without the added issue of figuring out how to get it to an island. More often than not, additional machinery is required to transport the goods to their final destination. Gigha only has a single track road with some tight corners, therefore this again limits the options available for transporting goods. These are some of the challenges faced when physically building on the island. However, there are other challenges met before even reaching the stage of procuring the construction. Accessing funding is a main issue. Funding avenues are available through Scottish Government, which is fantastic that we have the opportunity available. However, it can be difficult to secure this funding for a number of reasons. The funding is only available once at the capital delivery phase. Therefore, there is a period between the feasibility stage and getting to the build phase, which incurs expense that many organisations cannot afford. There are design fees, surveys, applications, valuations, and other resources such as project management, which is expensive and currently no direct funding available to support. If you make it to the build stage and submit an application to Scottish Government, you have to ensure you have match funding from elsewhere to try to strike a balance on how much funding you're requesting from Scottish Government. Scottish Government have costing benchmarks in place. However, for island communities in today's market, these benchmarks can be out of reach. The main challenge we have at the moment is securing our contractor. Tenders are required to be received before funding applications are submitted to ensure that the funding request is accurate. We received bids and have been in communications with our preferred contractor. However, our funding is not yet secured. So it's a case of how long can this contractor wait and hold their price before withdrawing from the project, as we cannot commit to the contractor without funds in place. The final main issue, which we're seeing across all areas, but particularly in the construction industry, is the rising costs. Firstly, costs are rising across materials and fuels, meaning it's more expensive to build in general. Secondly, being an island location automatically puts additional costs onto the build, such as travel and transport costs, which were mentioned previously. Thirdly, contractors need contingencies to provide some comfort in this uncertain period. However, funders are generally not in favour of funding contingencies, as the funds are not allocated to specific eligible outcomes. And finally, rural communities are generally seeking to deliver a small number of houses, meaning that there is an economies of scale factor to consider. Smaller rural projects are more likely to receive a higher per square metre cost for their development, which isn't recognised as value for money. Currently, it does feel like there are a number of obstacles when trying to deliver housing projects in rural and island areas, and I in particular don't have the solutions as such. However, these issues are recognised by many core agencies, many of which are here today. We also recognise the need to deliver more housing in these areas. Therefore, it's hoped that by working together, a feasible solution could be found. We need to look at how communities, particularly rural and island communities, can work together to tackle these issues, and how can we deliver housing that is specific to our community's needs in a more affordable way. That's everything from me, so thank you for listening, and I will pass you back over to Sarah.
Thank you, Jane. That was excellent. I particularly picked up on the procurement part, having just gone through the pain of a public contract Scotland tender. So I understand for small businesses it's quite a big process. And we'll be working to look at that and what support we can offer SMEs. And of course, we need to look at the funding mix as well. So what about some of the solutions then? That kind of takes us really quite nicely into our next presentation. We're going to hear from Alex Durie. He is the co-founder and director of a 722, which is an ecological construction startup business based in the Scottish Isles of the Outer Hebrides. and they provide offsite prefabrication of pre-insulated components. So it'll be great to hear from Alex. He's also one of the projects that we've supported as part of the programme. So great to hear from you, Alex.
Thanks, Sarah. So great to speak here today, and really interesting to hear some of the challenges and great things that are happening here from Jane. And hopefully by the time I've spoken, and Derek and Roddy later, you'll hear that there's some real innovation and answers to some of these questions from our island communities and how we can respond to the rural housing burden. So we are 722 Systems. I'm an architect, co-founder and commercial director of the company, and we're based out in North Uist in the Outer Hebrides, which is a wonderful place to live and also practice. We are set up by architects. We have a sister company called Fraser Architecture, and the leadership team of that are also the directors of 722 Systems. And we've got over 40 years experience collectively of delivering projects throughout the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, community, industrial, commercial, residential, to very high ecological standards. And we set up 722 Systems a few years ago of what's been a sort of 5-year journey on how we can build better in our island location, centering on the problems of procurement, getting materials here, how we can build better and control the quality of what we produce out here. So we've started from first principles, and we're really passionate about fabric first construction and the benefits that that can give. So we've designed a prefabricated and pre-insulated construction system that slots together like a big Lego kit. And it starts with the floor with pier foundations and a pre-insulated timber floor that slots together. Then we build the wall on top of that, and then the roof slots on top of that, a bit like the floor does. And we, through prefabricating and pre-manufacturing everything, we've worked with Best over the last few months through the AMCF fund to try and help us take our manufacturing to the next level. We also work with Harley Haddo consulting engineers through the structural side and the energy side right from the very start of this process, and they've been excellent in helping us certify our structural engineer and give us the pointers we need to get that tested properly. And also we can also deliver, if our clients want it, passive house schemes through Harley Haddo, and we'll also understand how our scheme and how the direction of travel of where the building industry is going in terms of net zero, and position ourselves for the sort of fabric first approach, which is coming in 2024. So the benefits of our system is that it's really ecological. We use formaldehyde-free OSB produced in Inverness, and we fill that with recycled newsprint insulation, which unfortunately comes from Austria, but we're working on how we can reduce the travel miles on that. Our standard components are all cut out from one single OSB sheet, and there's minimal waste. There's no waste at all apart from sawdust from those standard components. All that prefabrication and pre-installation leads to really quick on-site assembly, which is crucial in the islands, and especially with the weather and the ferries, and being able to program that properly, give our clients program and cost certainty from a really early stage in the design process. So that's really crucial in being able to deliver targets for our clients and build better. We have a holistic approach to how we do this. It's not just the components, it's the whole project approach, and part of that is the foundations, and we're really passionate about using pier foundations wherever possible. That gives us firstly minimal ground disturbance. Having a really light touch on the ground is a really important part of building ecologically, but we've also calculated that when compared to a ground slab and strip foundations, that it gives at least 50% reduction in concrete, which is a huge carbon problem, the use of concrete and cement in the construction industry. All our components are designed to be small, and that's part of having the available premises here and the power, only having single phase power for the most part, but also being able to make everything being able to be manually handled on site. That means we don't have to get big cranes onto site, which is a big issue because there aren't any in the Uists. And also it means that we have a much more ecological building site without gas guzzling plant on site. So it's a much more light touch way of building, which is really suited to smaller business and housing residential projects. All the components work together. We've designed them in such a way where everything there's cutouts from the way that the boxes and the beams interact with each other, whether the insulation flows through, giving a complete insulation envelope. We've got two types of system, a 300mm wide system and a 400mm wide system, both of which give amazing U values and can lead to a passive house certified design. And that, which is a really touch point at the moment, gives us our clients really low in-use costs. With that fabric first approach, it means that we can have excellent U values and really low in-use costs. Everything's screwed together and on PA foundations. So at the end of that building life, which hopefully is hundreds of years down the line, the whole thing can be unscrewed and moved somewhere else, leaving a really light touch on the ground and allowing the ground to regenerate around that site. So we've been busy for 5 years, as said, and the first stage of that was testing our design, and we achieved funding through Highlands and Isles Enterprise Small Innovation Grant to build a prototype last year. And it was great to sort of see that come to fruition, and we really wanted to test the bespoke nature of our scheme. So we got the standard boxes, but these can be made any size. So we've got great design freedom as architects, approaching this from an architecture point of view. So that's been really important to us. And we put this up to test this in terms of air quality and all the other sorts of things. And it's been a real success, allowing us to go through to our commercial projects. And this is a picture from site earlier this year of our first project we're delivering for a client. And this shows a site which has got 2.5 meter deep peat on it, which previously would have been really uneconomical to develop. But by using pier foundations, we can keep the site really clean and also minimize the amount of peat we're disturbing. And we've collaborated with a local contractor and the local council to use redundant tar bins to use as pier pads here. So again, recycling and delivering on what's a really lovely site in North Uist. This is just a section through that same house showing the design flexibility and how the system goes together in the foundation design. And it's really important to us with that the approach we've taken to have that bespoke and flexible nature of how we do it. That's then manifested in sort of one of our later projects, which was going to be built later this year. It's just a small house and sauna, why not, in North Uist. And this shows sort of the different sort of type of building that we can deliver with our system from approaching it from an architect's point of view. So we work with BEST through AMCF to look at the next iteration of our manufacturing templates. We've got a sort of semi-automated but mostly manual process in our workshop using templates for routing out our standard components to give the tabs and things that the whole thing slots together with. So we work with BEST to look at sort of refining our template design, looking at the best possible materials to use for that process, and working with the amazing machinery that they've got on site in Hamilton to look at how we can cut this out really efficiently and deliver real time savings for us in our workshop. So we took delivery of that a couple of weeks ago, which is great. And this is Ronald John, our head fabricator. He's a skilled boat builder and joiner from North Uist. Trying them out for the very first time, and we're looking at how we can build sort of semi-automated routing tables with these templates. We also built new assembly tables as well, which will help us minimize the space we need in our premises, which most of the space is taken up by that massive, amazing saw that you can see in the background. So it's just an example of how that router sort of goes around and cuts the tab out, and that tab then is the thing that interacts with the box below, which ties the whole thing together like a big Lego kit. So it's really fun being able to sort of advance these things with BEST and how we can really help with our manufacturing process. Through Highlands and Isles Enterprise as well, we've also been able to get funding through the Co-Innovate process, which has helped us hire our first member of staff back at the start of last year and really develop our process towards market. It allowed us to also take our kit to get tested at the National University of Ireland in Galway, the Timber Research Institute, and get it tested. And through the outputs of that, working with Harley Haddo, we know we can build up to 11 stories if we want to, which isn't usually a requirement out here in North Uist, but it just shows the strength and capability of our system and the innovation that we've put into it. So this is just my final thought for you, and this is just a wee Lego house that my son built when we were building the prototype last year. That there's the innovation and there's the knowledge out here in the islands to really help our own housing problems that we face out here, which are often unique, as Jane has just explained. and I hope that we can help solve, firstly, the climate emergency, but also the housing situation and other buildings to help communities out here grow, because there's huge demand for living out here, and we've got to be able to meet that. So thank you very much, and look forward to any questions you might have later. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was amazing. And from a personal perspective, I'm just delighted to see the prototypes getting used in the workshop. I felt like that was our first real success in the project, because we've actually been able to help someone develop the prototype. You know, it's exactly what the project's been set up to do. And we want to help more companies, so please get in touch if you'd like us to help with any innovation that you might have. I think we're going to have another poll. So if you'd like to help us answer, what is the biggest area of upskilling required for the construction supply chain? And a lot of what we're trying to do within the project is help upskill local contractors, help to develop them. So where do you think would be the biggest advantage, the biggest benefit for the people that you know are working in your local area? And also, how can we get in touch with them? How can we access those companies and help them develop? So is it carbon accounting, low carbon design, for example, passive house, offsite systems installation, or could we be looking at sustainable materials, for example, CLT? Just waiting for the results. Yeah, again, so a bit of a mix. Carbon accounting comes lowest, no wonder, because it's really complicated. Offsite systems, of course, we've got quite a lot of people who can see the benefits of that. And I think particularly when it comes to the labour shortage, you know, we've had a labour shortage for 3 decades. It's not going to get any better. We need to find ways, different ways of building if we're going to solve the housing problem, particularly for rural and island areas. So thanks for that, everyone. I'm delighted now to announce our next speakers. I'm going to introduce two. They're going to do their presentation together. So we have Derek Logie from the Chief Executive of Rural Housing Scotland, which is a national charity that works to deliver affordable housing in rural Scotland. He has helped to deliver and secure affordable housing, enabling development in Gigha, Iona, Ulva Ferry, Lagan, Tarbrax and Wisdom, amongst many others. We're delighted to have Derek here. And we're also going to hear from Roddy McInnes, who him and his partner Lisa have created Modular West, which provides a distinct hands-on approach, responsive design process, relationships with clients, and a holistic fabrication process in his factory. So we're going to hear Modular Factory, so we're going to hear from them both just now. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Vera. I'll just try and share my screen. Can you see that? Okay.
Yep, we can see your screen. You just need to pop it into, yep, and your camera's still off, Derek, so if you could just pop that on. Thank you.
All right, sorry about that. My camera. Is that me?
Perfect, yep. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Derek Logie. I work for Rural Housing Scotland. We're a charity that works with rural communities to develop solutions to housing issues across the whole of Scotland. And one of the things we've been looking at in recent months is ways in which we can actually help to deliver or help young people in particular stay in rural communities. There's a real crisis happening in some of our remoter areas where young people are having to leave because they can't afford to live there, can't find any affordable housing. They're facing competition by people who are looking to escape to the country to come across some kind of post-COVID rural idyll. So, and we really kind of caught a kind of grasp of that when we saw an open letter from a bunch of people young people in Uist who wrote to the Stornoway Gazette, and it was picked up by the Herald about lack of affordable housing and what that was doing for the local economy and the local culture in the Hebrides. And it's quite stark, actually. You look at the population and the working age population and the decline of that within places like South Uist, and in between the 2011 and 2018, the working age population of that area had declined by something like a quarter. So, you know, that has real implications for the sustainability of these kind of communities. So, working with the Scottish Government, we've developed the concept of the Smart Clachan as an ambitious, community-led, sustainable solution to depopulation, demographic change, and also the climate crisis. What we've imagined is a kind of community-based initiative to create affordable, cooperative, interconnected and sustainable, low-carbon, live workspaces in several locations across Uist, helping stem depopulation and encouraging relocation. The picture you can see on your screen is the first of our proposed clachans. It will take place on the peninsula of Ruva-Vulture, which is in Loch Boisdale, and we're aiming to build 6 to 8 houses at Ruva-Vulture. If I just move on to the next slide, if I can. Sorry about this. And the idea is that those homes will be connected, not just physically, but connected in regard to the people living there. We'll share things like share renewables. They will share a digital workspace. We're looking at a shared polycrub, polytunnel, and potentially things like a boat slip and a boathouse, given the location. And the idea, we want to kind of create more sustainable and interconnected communities, ones where people kind of live and work collectively in those spaces. So the first one will be at Ruva-Vulture. Each property will have a generous garden space. The homes will be designed and built locally to the highest standards of energy performance, hopefully to Pacify standard. And what we've also wanted to do is look at how we can actually build them differently as well. And sorry, I'm trying to get to the next screen. So this gives you an artist's impression of what we're planning. That's the proposed layout of the clachan. So you can see how the buildings are kind of come together collectively, and how they are kind of connected to the workspace as well, and to the boatyard and to others. So, and the polytunnel is not shown on that map, but it's really designed to be a more kind of cooperative space to work within, and one where people can share resources and share skills. And this gives you, that's a plan of the site at Ruva-Vulture. Where we are at the moment with that is that we're making an application, or Storage Use, who are the community landowner who have given the land for this development, are making an application to the Rural Housing Fund main fund for that. And we're also working with Modular West, who are based on Barra, to build the houses. So I'm going to hand over to Roddy, and he's going to tell you a bit more about the construction process.
Hi everyone. Yeah, so just a bit about us. I'm Roddy McInnes, based out in Isle of Barra. I'm a director of Modular West. We set up Modular West a year and a half ago, basically to build modular housing in the Western Isles, you know, and throughout Scotland really. But it was in response to I run another business, Coastal Homes, that has done traditional construction on the islands for the last 10 years, and every year it's been getting harder and harder to make that work. There's a whole load of reasons for that. You know, the ability to tender for bigger jobs like this one, the weather, transport, all the same issues that Alex raised and Jane raised. It's very much it's a difficult place to build housing the traditional way. Most of the year it's dark by 4 o'clock, and it's dark at 9 o'clock in the morning. So even to get a full day in was getting more difficult. And so in response to that, we set up Modular West, and basically we're looking at producing homes from the factory environment. And we built a factory now. We completed it October last year, and we're now in production. We've now started producing buildings, and it's made a huge difference to our business. Basically, Modular West now can work 24 hours a day. We can bulk buy materials, we can secure the environment we're working in. As far as training people, it's a much more conducive environment to do that. You can have a much more task-based learning. Allows us to take apprentices into an environment where they want to be. It's not many apprentices want to be out there in the weather, so it's made a huge difference to how we are going to be going forward. We still have our traditional side, that'll always be there. Some people don't want to see change, so the coastal home side will always kind of have a market. But I think, like Derek was saying, and the other speakers, I suppose it's about how everything moves on, and the construction industry has been relatively slow at doing that. So things like this project we're doing with Derek in US alongside Storis allows companies like ourselves to offer a full design and build route, which allows the client a bit of security with their budgets, gives us a bit of clarity right from the beginning to push these things to a highest standard as we can. So we provided a design and build service on this alongside Derek and Storis, and what you can see there is an artist's impression of how the smart cladding concept could work. You can see it's quite a straightforward kind of vernacular looking set of buildings, and that lends itself to the modular construction. We're restricted in as far as what we can transport, what heights we can transport them, what widths we can transport them. We've got things like ferries to contend with. We've got overhead lines to contend with. So you're working within those constraints. What we found is a form that works well in the vernacular for up here. So we tend to have a standard module at 2.9 meters wide by anything up to 15, 16 meters as a kind of standard. Now, as you can see on the screen here, you start off with a panel base, you then build a superstructure, you then transport that by lorry to site. It's then craned off in 2 pieces and completed on site. Now, the big advantages for us there are we're working in a completely controlled environment throughout the build phase. In the meantime, when the weather allows, the groundwork's getting done. And very much like Alex had mentioned there, lightweight foundations are also a big part of what we're looking to do going forward, having less impact on the land. As a lot of the land in the islands and stuff, it's not conducive to building. It's not necessarily flat and ideal for building off. So these modern methods of construction are really helping that. As far as a construction method, because we do a design and build route, we can build to any standard really, based on what the client's needs are. So right up to passive house, like Derek mentioned. It's timber frame construction. So as far as a lending point of view or anything like that, there's nothing massively innovative about what we're doing other than the environment we're doing it in, how we're transporting it. But working alongside Best and different people like that, what we're looking to do is come up with more modern methods of construction that are going to benefit the client in the long run. But really, it's that's kind of where it's at. And the big benefit, like I say, is to be able to control the environment, control the timelines, train up people a lot easier, you know, within the factory environment. You can see there, you know, it's a substantial space. It's 1,000 square meters. You know, we can build 4 houses at a time in there. It can be transportable by sea. The ferries, like I say, we're working within certain restrictions, but that doesn't change the design. We can, you know, stack these. We can, you know, lay them side by side. There's plenty of different options for what we can do going forward. But really, yeah, it's just a solution we've found for working in the islands that works a lot better than how we've traditionally been doing it. And hopefully for some of the different organisations on the call, that's something that might kind of ring through with a lot of them. So other than that, I think the next slide, Derek, is back to yourself for rural housing, is it?
I'm not muted. Yeah.
Nah,
So I think that was more or less the.
Yeah.
I'm trying to I'm not much good. So anyway, that's just really some more information about Smart Clachan and about really where the concept came from. You know, it's kind of based on a kind of traditional model for how people kind of live and work in a rural community. But we've had a few exhibitions in Uist, and we've had a lot of interest from people looking for affordable housing in Uist, because these houses will be sold. This first project, the houses will be sold as shared equity, and we hope to be on site next year. Scottish Government permitting, and yeah, and we hope that's the first of many. And we're thankful to Esme Fairbairn Foundation for providing funding so we can employ fantastic Smart Clachan Development Officer Donna Young, and we'll put Donna's details up online for people to see. And if you've got any interest in Smart Clachan, then do get in touch with Donna. Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Roddy and Derek. Amazing presentation. So good to hear more about Smart Clachan, and you know, the benefits that you were talking about, Roddy, of MMC is kind of what we've been saying for the last 6 years at best. So it's really good to hear somebody, you know, who noticed that building modular would increase the capacity. People want to work indoors. I actually hadn't realised about the light, and now it's opened up a 24-hour way of operating. So just fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'm glad to say we're going to have the question and answer session next. We'll get everyone on screen. We have had a few questions coming through, which is great. We are running slightly early, so it may be, depending on how the question and answer session goes, we can finish up a little early. So we've got about half an hour to have a discussion and answer some questions. So I think Tom might be coming on to join us as well. He's the other lead for the project. And yeah, we'll just head on to, hi Tom, here you are. Yeah, we'll head on to the question section. Okay, first one. How can the great examples from 722 and Modular West be scaled up or cover larger areas of rural Scotland to meet the market demand? So I'm just going to pick on you, Alex, first, and then go to Roddy and Derek.
That's fine. Well, we plan to scale up and meet that demand anyway. There's a huge holistic way of, there's so many holistic reasons why it's a challenge out here, as Roddy's put out there. The biggest one's ferries. We've got to sort out CalMac, basically, and being able to deliver houses throughout the Highlands and Isles of Scotland is a huge barrier. Also, it's sort of a chicken and egg situation. The more housing we build, the more key worker housing there is for us to be able to employ more people who want to come to the island and work here. So it's about keeping the funding going. There's definitely demand out there. Derek said some figures, but sort of from a personal perspective and sort of just on North Eurus, more people are moving here of a working age every single year, almost every single month, and want to live and work here, whether that's being sort of digital nomads or want to have a job, then with anyone. So I think the demand's there. It's just about us keeping up with it and being able to meet it. The other challenge is premises and making sure the infrastructure on the islands and the rural communities are there so that the innovation can be delivered. That's what my point would be on that one.
Thank you. That's great. Roddy, what's your thoughts? You might be on mute. Sorry, Roddy.
Is that it there? Yeah, great. I think on the modular side, we're not really restricted at all as far as, you know, getting stuff around the country. It's, you know, in most cases standard transport methods used to take them around the country. I think one of the big advantages on the modular side is that, you know, going into other communities, one of the big concerns is that, you know, you're essentially taking work out of communities by producing them in Barra or producing them in, you know, some of these other places. But I think what people are realizing now is there's so much demand that you can still get the groundwork side built, you know, locally, which would be great for us. That's what we look to do, is utilize local contractors wherever possible. So, you know, one of the big advantages is in a lot of these places, you know, skilled tradesmen are hard to come by. So I think the fact that they can carry out the groundworks, they can carry out the landscaping side of it, they can do the connections, you know, it's a much smaller package for a lot of smaller contractors, you know, because a lot of the package is controlled within the environment of the factory. And I think, you know, we did it in response to the fact that modular construction was coming from abroad, you know, as much as anything. So, you know, that was madness. We were getting projects, you know, being proposed on Barra that were coming from, whether it be Nottingham or whether it be France or whether it be Germany or whether it be, you know, and that just doesn't seem right for the local economy here. But I think very much like Alex is saying, I think the other side is that we need to be able to service our own workers. You know, one of the biggest issues we've got is housing our own workers. So yeah, it is really about investment and, you know, companies like rural housing and stuff being able to deliver these projects, especially the shared equity thing for an island like Barra. That's a big incentive, because most people can't afford a bespoke new build house. So I think it's, but yeah, I think that's the biggest thing on our side.
Yeah, absolutely, understanding demand and making sure that the work is shared, definitely. Okay, we've got another question. This is from Peter. Where are the modular houses sourced from, i.e. who builds them? So
we build them obviously on Barra. I think on that side we source a lot of our materials locally where possible, and I think as far as deliveries, you know, to Barra, we can now, because we've got the factory facility, we can now bulk buy. So it means less transport to the site, less transport off the site, less waste. So it really does make a big difference having the facility to store the materials, to allow the team to do their job without worrying about weather and, you know, timescales and stuff like that. So especially, you know, the CalMac issue is our biggest issue. You know, the ferries, are transport off the islands, our biggest issue, but by being able to take in Arctic loads at a time, it makes a substantial difference to us. You know, the supply chain right now is suffering. You know, everybody's suffering because of the supply chain, but you know, us being able to order earlier and half the time on site by the groundworks and the build going conducively together has made a big difference for us. So yeah, they're built in Barra, but I think this is something that, you know, could be rolled out very easily in different communities. You know, that this factory model of modular housing and that type of thing could quite easily go into, you know, various communities around Scotland. I think the days of a man in a van building your house it's just too expensive. So something has to change. So I think, you know, I'd say that's as far as that.
Yeah, I'd taken some notes actually about the design, the vernacular that you've designed in terms of the meterage. We supported a project a couple of years ago now on a fully modular build for Alva, and one of the problems with the challenges that hadn't been thought about was the Transport Scotland require you to have a police escort for meterage over a certain load, and it really increased costs and it increased the challenge of delivering that project because it just hadn't been thought about. So I think there's lots of things that come out of different projects that make you realise you have to come up with a different solution. Alex, do you have anything that you would? I'm presuming the components you're building are built by you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll just echo a lot of the sentiments that Roddy's just said. That being able to prefabricate is the key to not only controlling the volatility in the market at the moment, being able to offer cost certainty for clients. It's incredible what advantages I can give you, and be able to take that forward. So yeah, we just source all our materials and build them in Uist. That's as simple as that. Yeah.
Okay, I've got another good question for Peter. How much would it cost to build, say, a 2-bed house on an Argyle island?
Which one? Yeah, it's a moving feast.
Depends on lots of things, doesn't it?
It's a moving feast, and timber prices are just bonkers at the moment. But from our perspective, it's kind of similar to a good thermally insulated timber kit. What we offer, and all the other things are sort of all the other variables are where it is, how you can get there, time of year, all those sorts of things. So
standards to build to.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, I think for ourselves, it's we can obviously speed up the process considerably by working within the factory. It's a much more efficient environment to do it. We have the added costs of transport, but we are finding, compared to the other business that we run, which is traditional construction, we're making savings of up to probably anywhere up to 10%, depending on where it's going, what the groundworks situation is. But it's there's definitely savings to be made. But I think as the business evolves, and as it's client driven, a lot of it really. It's really down to what standard the client wants to build to, and what their goals are for the project, how good a site they've got. So it's like how long's a bit of string really. But I think we're noticing a big difference between our traditional side and the modular side, and it's all to do with the environment we build it in.
Yeah, just my final point is we can't make timber any cheaper. We can't make our core stuff any cheaper, but it allows us to offer greater cost certainty from a much earlier point in the process. So you're not strung along and then suddenly given a final bill that's 100% more than you were expecting. So that's the biggest advantage.
I'm just going to bring. Oh, sorry. When you go, Roddy.
Sorry, Derek.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, Derek, I didn't realise it was you. Yep, come in, please.
About Alex saying you can't make timber any cheaper. You kind of can if there's a lot of communities own their own woodlands. We're working with a group down in Newcastleton in the Scottish borders who've taken ownership of their own woodland, and we're looking at how they can utilise that wood to build CLT, dowel laminated panels to build houses with, to reduce the kind of climate impact of transporting timber, but also to make use of a product that's on their doorstep.
How are you approaching the regulatory side of that, Derek, in terms of
getting very early days with that one?
Get in touch with Best. That's how you do it.
Yeah, I was going to say we've got a CLT press, so absolutely delighted to help them. We've done a huge amount of work with homegrown timber in the factory and proving the case for CLT. So we've got the equipment. If they want we can link them up. Absolutely.
Well, that would make a big difference, because I mean, only other CLT project I've worked on was Alva Ferry Phase 1, where the CLT came from the Basque Country. So
that's right. Yeah. Just the travel miles and the carbon emissions. Jane, we've had another question through. How do you, it's kind of been answered, how do the cost of these modular systems compare with more traditional builds? I think we're saying used to be more, but now more equal because of the increase in materials cost. I think that's how have you found, Jane, the kind of cost comparison?
Yeah, for us on Gigha at the moment, our housing project, we've went through a kind of a traditional build route, and our tenders have came in pretty high. Just when the previous question about how much would it cost to build a 2-bed house, and I'm pretty certain that the costs that we have are probably not normal, not standard maybe, or just maybe it's reflective of the current situation. But at the moment, we've tendered 5 houses, and including all the design costs and surveying, everything all in there, we're looking at 1.8 million, which between 5 units kind of comes out at over 350. And these units are all 2 and 1 bed homes. So at the moment, we only went down the route of, I don't have anything in terms of modular build for comparison, but I'd imagine potentially could be, I don't know, a more cost-effective option, possibly, depending. Maybe, I don't know if Roddy or Alex could comment on that.
I think that there's definitely things to be made. It's about scalability as well. You know, if you're doing a 2-house scheme compared to a 10-house scheme, you know, there's obviously, you know, that's where you get the real advantage of modular construction. It's the repetitiveness of it, it's the efficiency that's created by you're repeating the process, and you know, and as our business develops, that kind of naturally happens anyway. You become more efficient. You know, there's new ways of doing things, and you know, your equipment and machinery changes the game, you know, every couple of years. So I think it's one of those where, you know, we're pushing as hard as we can because we have to innovate, you know, and I think that's when you'll start to see the, you know, the costs dropping substantially, because it's such a, you know, with any new method of construction, it's about the buy-in, you know. It's people are worried, you know, it's why we've predominantly stayed quite traditional with our first offerings of, you know, traditional timber frame. You know, it's easy to mortgage, it's easy to engineer, it's easy, you know, there's a lot of, it's an easy option to start with. But I think like Alex and, you know, different companies like that are doing, you know, we're open to doing any form of construction that makes it more affordable. It's just about, you know, our big advantages is the environment we do it in, you know, and that's the biggest game changer, because I'm sure Jane and all the contractors on that island will have the same issues where we can't render a house from, you know, September until March, you know, just due to weather constraints. You know, that's a full build schedule in some cases.
Yeah.
So,
and as Derek was touching there with the community timber scheme there, we're looking at one of our next R&D projects that we want to do is to look at how we can look at wool insulation. So it's a huge untapped resource, especially on the US. We don't have any trees, unfortunately, so we can't set up our own sawmill. But we have got a huge amount of wool which just rots away in crofters' fields. So we're actually got a project with someone who works at the local wool mill here, and we're going to collaborate with how we can look at tearing up wool and stuff in our boxes. So untapping sort of community resources like that will be a real way of bringing down costs for places like Gigha. And from our part, we sort of set 722 up so we can deliver for people like Jane and other communities around, and I'm sure Roddy's the same. So yeah,
I think it's an interesting one, that one, Alex, because wool was one of the ones, you know, it's a real no-brainer. You know, where we are, and you've got farmers getting nothing for what they're getting rid of. And we've looked at this for the Smart Clacking project alongside Derek, and you know, about using as much locally sourced materials as possible. I think that's where the collaboration between, you know, the different people on these calls, you know, can make a difference about getting these things to fruition. And you know, we had a lot of help from Enterprise setting up the factory, you know, and that was great, you know, really pushed things on for us. And you know, I think the more help like that that's out there, that, you know, the quicker we can all start to see the benefits of it.
Absolutely, there's so much help out there. Part of the message on the portal is to tell people about where all the access to the resources are. So I really do encourage everyone to join that. We've got a technical question on funding. I'm not sure who can answer this. The Smart Clacking project appears to be halfway housed to a co-housing project. In that case, how does the funding model work, as government funding does not currently allow for any communal space or objectives? What are these systems?
Yeah, the co-housing model, a proper co-housing scheme would have a kind of common house, and which you with a communal kitchen and those kind of things. And you know, for co-housing, that's a real essential. But the funding models don't enable that to happen.
Okay.
The Smart Clacking project, the cooperative space is mostly the kind of office space and the polytunnel. The polytunnel itself is not going to costs a huge amount of money, so we're looking for separate grant funding for that. And the co-working space is, we're hoping, well, we're talking to Hiles Enterprise, so we're kind of separating out different parts, because the housing people only want to support housing, they don't want to support other things. So, despite the fact it's
creative, isn't it, about the different funding that you can apply for, and you know, hopefully we can share some resources on that. If that's going to help people, if people raise that in the feedback form, they'd like to hear more about, let us know. That's what the project's been set up to do, is to share all this information and resources. What current and future funding opportunities are available for insulation products that employ circular principles for old housing stock in island communities? Does it matter if the housing is owned by an island heritage trust? So there's a few things in there. So firstly, do we know of any funding opportunities for insulation projects? And secondly, the circular element, and does it matter if the houses are owned? I personally don't, unfortunately, know, but I will find out if no one else knows.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the, you know, I don't know an awful lot about this, but one of the things I was hearing about recently is the fact that in the Western Isles, the funding opportunities for insulation is going to be badly affected by the layoffs at TIG, at Tyne Chagall. So there won't be a supplier, there won't be somebody to actually build in insulation in one of the communities with the highest levels of fuel poverty in the whole of Scotland. It's scandalous, really. But that's been allowed to happen.
I'll take note of that. That's maybe something that the Innovation Centre can look at with High. Okay, let's see. Question from Tony. Some questions have names attached and some don't. Apologies. Zoned housing land is scarce and often expensive. Have Jane or Derek found that they have been able to secure planning consent for rural housing on land which was not formally allocated for residential development due to the social and community benefits?
Afraid I can't really answer that one either. Our land that the location that we've chosen to build our new houses on, it does fall within the local development plan. It falls within that kind of, I can't remember the name of it, within the local development plan sort of village settlement zone. So we've not had to kind of go through that process of sort of justifying the proposal, and the trust that owns the land as well. So we've never even had to be through the process of buying land again at any point. I don't know, Derek, if you've had any experience of any projects that have had to go through that.
Well, the Ruven Vulture Clachan is again, it's on land which is in the zone for housing, but we will be looking at other locations where it's the land isn't zoned as such, but generally, well, Alex and Roddy maybe contradict me, but generally, planning in the Outer Hebrides is perhaps a bit easier than Perthshire, for example.
Yeah, definitely. We've been involved with it's a private housing development on uncrofted land where we could look at 5 or 6 houses, and the planners have no issue with it at all, because there's such a housing demand out here, and that's a great and refreshing approach. But it shouldn't just be carte blanche as well. We've had a few incidents in North Uist where land that previously was sort of not pristine but not developed has been developed in a ribbon development, and now it's completely changed the whole aspect of the island. So I'd really encourage planning officers to be really proactive about how they want communities and people like us and Roddy, where we can really plan together how our communities are going to respond to this demand, rather than just creating linear ribbon development, which just completely changes places like Uist and Barra. So
I mean, the one place that we're also working on the Clachan project is at Comrie in Perthshire, and with Comrie Croft, and they've had trouble with the planning, or the attitude of planners towards what's seen as being residential development in the countryside, despite the fact that the development is kind of ultra sustainable in as much as you know, there are going to be no cars. You know, the construction materials are fantastically sustainable. You're talking about vermiculture, sewage works. So kind of it's going to tread very lightly on the land, this development, yet you know, people are going to live and work in the same space, and so they won't be commuting. So I think planning needs to maybe get with the 21st century in terms of how people live and work. And I think it was interesting that in the spring there was a lot of discussions about the national planning framework and how bad it was, the draft that came out, because it didn't recognise the fact that you know, people had changed how they live and work, particularly through the pandemic. And I think that's something that we need to build on to you know, to stem rural depopulation, because it is a huge coming issue. If we can't repopulate many rural communities, then the ability of people to continue to live there into their old age will be severely lacking.
Yeah, I've written down that, but I'm thinking we can maybe get planning involved and do maybe a webinar or some kind of engagement with them around these issues. We've got a timber question from Mel, thank you. How are current timber prices affecting your model, and where do you plan to source it from? I think we've kind of touched on that, but yeah, what are the prices like at the moment, guys?
Do you want to go, Roddy?
Really bad, Sarah.
Yeah. It's no, I mean, like I say, month on month for the last, it feels like almost the last 2 years, really. It's just been pretty consistently increasing. I haven't seen it, you know, start to settle even, you know. So I think, you know, again, a lot of the ways we're trying to mitigate that is by purchasing materials as early as possible, you know, and you know, having that material secure in the factory allows us, you know, the ability to, you know, to at least, you know, stabilize the price over a kind of 3 to 4 to 5 month period. But I mean, it's really that dramatic right now, where that 3 to 4 to 5 month period could be the difference between, you know, tens of thousands of pounds. But it's an industry-wide thing. It's not something we're exclusively having to deal with. And it's not just timber. It's almost every building product that's gone up. And I think that's why, you know, for community housing associations and different things like that, is it's probably doesn't seem as real as it is. You know, when these price per square meter comes back, you know, and it horrifies some people, but you know, we're just a contractor trying to, you know, make a living, you know, and do these things, but it's very, very difficult in the current environment. And you know, without help from the government, a lot of these projects just will not happen. You know, they'll just run aground and they'll stop. So I think it's, you know, it's important that the help is maintained for both, you know, the construction side and the end user, you know, because you know, if the house costs more to build, it's going to cost more to buy, and if you can't afford to buy it, you know, it's the end of the circle, really. So I think they're consistently going up.
Yeah, I think inflation is a problem for everyone right now, isn't it? So yeah, not an easy one to solve. This is a really interesting question from Gareth. As a student, what skills does everyone think are important to develop in university to prepare for these shifts in industry, and what are ways to get involved early?
I think apprenticeships are key. You don't have to go to university to learn this stuff. It's learning on the task, as Roddy said, is really key, and that's the same for both design and sort of delivering the projects as well. In university, in terms of architecture, design, team sort of skills, learning with real life projects with real life consequences is the key. That's when I learned the most stuff. Built a prefabricated office for FairShare when I was at university, and that's the thing I learned more than anything for my whole 7 years. So we've got to start putting ourselves in the real world and dealing with real world problems at universities, because frankly it's useless if you're just doing stuff that then gets burnt in paper piles. We've got to start everyone's got to pull together and deal with the real problems that we're facing.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, I think further what Alex is saying now, we've got, a few apprentices on right now. We're looking to take on another couple this year. I think, the apprenticeship scheme itself could actually do with moving a bit more with it, and, more remote assessments. And, these kids are going to college for 6 months of the first year with you. And it's important to learn these different things. But I think also it's important that these tutors come out and see that what they're doing in these different environments, like the factory environment, is just as relevant going forward, and whether they can fit a sash window or whether they can fit, a hipped roof. And I think it's important that as these methods, Alex will find that he'll get a set of joiners that have never put together any of his system, but it would be good if these modern methods are accredited a bit better, so that the kids can spend more time in the environment, really specialize in what they're doing, and kick on. Because a lot of, the aging population in the construction industry is a massive issue in the islands, especially. We're getting the last of the electricians, going into retirement. We're getting the last of the plumbers going into retirement. So it's imperative that between the schools, training, organizations and contractors, we get more people involved, because without the apprenticeship scheme, I think it'd be very, very difficult with the way the price of material are. It would be very difficult, to compensate that. So because we can, teach people by task, it really does make a difference. You don't need 3 years experience to carry out the task we're doing that day. You need to be able to follow instruction. And so I think it's been a real big help for us, the apprenticeship scheme, but I think it's something going forward, people might realise how important it is for the construction industry.
Also, we try to be as simple as possible with our scheme. So if we say we built somewhere on Gigha, we could use unskilled people from Gigha to put our system together. There's no reason why communities can't utilise sort of the design input of other innovative people to unleash the potential that they have with them. It's not rocket science, and we'd certainly be open to using that sort of local labour. So it's everyone learns throughout their life, so it's not just universities as well.
Yeah, from my personal perspective, for anyone at university who's on the webinar, net zero, understanding carbon emissions, understanding operational energy, understanding building physics, particularly around retrofit projects. These are all things that you can go and learn yourself, which I've had to do. And I would say if you can get an understanding of how those kind of larger issues are affecting construction, then you'll be ahead of the game. So anything around net zero, particularly retrofit, building physics, these are the kind of hot topics. Carbon accounting, but it's yes, it's like accounting, so it's a bit of a dry subject. Anyone else want to chip in there? Okay. Question from Michael. How have the presenters found the approvals process for MMC with the Building Standards Department?
Well, we're fairly straightforward on our side, because we've started off, with a lot of traditional, methods. It's timber frame construction. It's all falls within current regs that we're doing. We're not pushing the envelope by any means. We're trying to use as innovative materials as possible and in as innovative a way as possible. But I think more on Alex. Alex will better be able to answer this.
Yeah, it's all about liaison and having really good relationships with the local building control, and we've been doing that from a very early stage, and we're being viewed the same way as a SIPS panel, but we've actually got much better performing insulation in terms of fire. But we're now at the stage where there's a huge amount of methods of construction out there. Everything's been done and a lot of stuff has been tested, so we've got to be able to take a wider view of that. So it's all about liaison, and we know from our funding that testing is really important. That's what we've targeted from an early stage to get our structural testing. So keeping the funding streams open for innovators to get the innovations tested properly to get market acceptance is really crucial, because it's a huge capital outlay for startup companies, and places like BEST. I'd encourage you to maybe start looking at sort of testing facilities and how you can deliver that, because especially fire testing, there's nowhere really in Scotland that's affordable, and the BRE sort of falling by the wayside. So testing needs to keep going, otherwise modern methods of constructions will only ever be really quite niche.
Yeah, totally agree. We've had a number of inquiries as part of the project around testing. There's not enough testing houses in Scotland. It has been looked at from a Scottish Government investment perspective. We're doing a bit of work around policy on that, and we'll keep everybody updated. But yeah, Tom's been doing a bit of work on that, and there is a lack of testing capacity. And again, if we, just as you've said, Alex, if we want to have these innovative new systems, we need to have ways to test at scale. Okay, so I think this will be, yeah, last couple of questions. Question from Alan for Alex and Roddy. How remote a location have you built in, and how did you deal with energy and water supplies?
You have battery operated tools and you take an IBC full of water. It's really easy.
It's no, I think you know, nearly everywhere we're building is pretty remote, but you know, some of the smaller islands. But I think very much like Alex says, it's you know, with all the new methods of construction now, because we're doing this modular approach, we're doing a project at the minute where we're doing a pod that's completely self-sufficient, you know, and so it leaves the factory ready to go. So essentially we're delivering it, you know, and that's okay if it's a small project like a pod or that type of thing. But as technology moves on, that's how I see it going. You know, I see us actually delivering the infrastructure with the building, you know, and you know, I think that would be the, you know, the way to go, especially in the remote communities where, you know, you're not going to connect to the main sewers, or you're not going to have, you know, it could be quite cost prohibitive just to get your power connected, you know. So I think, you know, as things become more efficient, the buildings become more efficient, there's less demand on the electricity and stuff. So, you know, I think that's the way hopefully things start to head. But small scale right now, that's straightforward enough. I think if you're going to be doing housing, it's a bit more difficult, you know, and to make it comply and pass regs, and you know, I think you'd have a few more issues there.
I'd like to just ask Jane a question on that. Sort of, what's the biggest challenges for building in Gigha? What would you say to tenderers and contractors who want to come help you with your problems out there? What would you say to that?
I think when we've been tendering, our local contractors are generally local enough so that they've kind of either already built on Gigha or built nearby. They kind of have an understanding of what to expect, I suppose. So that kind of, maybe it doesn't really answer the question, but it means that a lot of our contractors already they already know what they're up against, in a sense. But yeah, even though Gigha is an island and it's a rural location, a lot of our developments are in. And this development in particular isn't that remote in terms of the island. It's still got nearby access to services. So yeah, we're a wee bit more fortunate with that side of things. But yeah, I think when anytime we're tendering with contractors, there's just kind of this transparency about the challenges, which is yeah, things like bringing your own water supplies, or I don't know, generators needed for the site, things like that. Yeah, it just has to be communicated through the tender process to set expectations and allow them to factor in the cost of all of that as well. And again, that's probably why costs for developing on Gigha are so high in comparison to sort of less remote locations.
Yeah.
Can I just add one thing, just to say, I mean, remote locations will have these added infrastructure costs associated with them. And I think it's important that the funders realise that and acknowledge that and accommodate it, because the development in remote rural locations is fundamentally a strategic priority for us as a country in order to kind of maintain our population, and you know, we need to realise that we need to see strategic infrastructure investment as being small developments in small communities as much as huge developments on the edge of cities.
Yep, I totally agree. Infrastructure costs are, yeah, crazy. Okay, last question. And there were a couple that we didn't get to, but I'll come back to you. Question from Martin. Fitting out modular homes is still a challenge. Are there some innovative ideas to make this side quicker, simpler and cheaper?
I think, you know, the way our houses are delivered, that's almost 95% complete. You know, the kitchens are in, tilings are done, floorings, but there's, don't get me wrong, there's a small element, of connecting the items on site, but what we've really gone for is getting to as close to completion as possible. It's not just a substructure or we're literally decorated within 5–10% of it being completed. We just find it's just a better environment for us to do it, and I think you can doing a lot of these finishes, things like render and all these different things. So it's another thing that we've looked at is modern materials as opposed to your traditional wet trades, where it's block or render or these different things. So looking at innovative materials is also a big thing that helps us complete more of the builds within the factory. So I think that's that's one of the biggest things for us, is to be able to leave the factory essentially with a week on site, and because the groundworks essentially have been done, so you're taking a painter and decorator with you really, and and that's it, and that's the way we're doing it moving forward. So there's always going to be wee bits and pieces. Each project's slightly slightly different, but no, ours tend to leave with a lot of that work done. So that's where that's at.
Anything else to add? Okay,
yeah,
we've got.
Just eliminating wet trays. We put plywood on our walls as standard, but we're also looking at things that the car industry do, like wiring looms and really interesting innovations. And I think there's a lot that the building industry can learn from really advanced manufacturing processes to really look at the innovation, because there are limitations with building traditionally, even if it's in a modular area. So we've got to be willing to learn and develop modern methods of construction to really unlock the potential how we can build.
Yeah, and actually you can, Martin, you can go and visit car manufacturing factories to find out what they're doing. So if you want help with organising that, give us a shout. We're going to have a final poll, and then I'll move on to closing remarks. So we talked earlier about starting up a development. What's the biggest barrier to delivery of the affordable rural housing? And some of these have been mentioned actually in the discussion. So is it lack of economies of scale, which affect the cost? Limitations to the grant allowance, again that's been mentioned as well, competition from urban areas for main contractors, or is it lack of relevant skills of supply chain? And these are all things that we can look at on the portal in terms of resources and policy. I should have had materials in there, materials costs. Yeah, so grant is obviously a huge factor, and I know there's a number of work getting done in this area with the SFHA and rural housing and others looking at the intervention rates. Yeah, economies of scale, of course, because you're not getting the thousands of houses in each development. So all that remains for me to say is thank you so much to our panel, to Jane, to Alex, to Roddy, to Derek. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed today. The question session's actually been one of the best that I've been involved in. Loads of questions. Sorry we didn't get to everybody. I'll come back to you. I think we're going to put the link up for the portal. Please sign up if you haven't already, and do engage with us. And yeah, thanks very much for a really, really great session.
Thanks.